Welcome back into Talking Fitchburg. Joined today from the National Weather Service Milwaukee, Sullivan, and is our friend of the show, Tim Hallbach. Tim, welcome back. How you doing on this, as we tape this, Eclipse Day slash every weather event in Wisconsin day? I don't know.
It's
It's
everything.
been a
Yeah, no,
season.
I'm doing great. Thanks,
Uh,
Jeremy.
we're glad we're glad you're doing great. We know you've been on the road doing the storm spotting classes. You got all this crazy weather going on. We had an interview kind of talking a little bit about just what's happened earlier this year and just kind of the look ahead, if you will. But this week, Severe Weather Awareness Week in Wisconsin, and this interview was focused in on different areas to kind of just refresh your mind on the different things that are going on. Tim, overall, if you were to summarize Wisconsin and severe weather, what would you tell people that are new to the area?
I'd say, most of the time the weather is going to be great, but there are times where you have to be prepared for that bad weather. So if you're doing things that are making yourself vulnerable, a lot of times people come here to do hiking or camping, a lot of outdoor activities, attending a large event. Uh, it's important to stay up on the weather and what the chances are for the bad weather to occur while you're doing those things. So, doing things like camping, obviously, if you got your tent parked underneath a tree and a big windstorm comes, that's going to make you a little bit more vulnerable to the situation. So, just thinking about what kind of different concerns you might have, but damaging winds is typically the main thing that we see here in Wisconsin. But depending on the year, we could have a bunch of tornadoes. We could get flash flooding, a lot of lightning. Some years, like when we have drought, we maybe don't have as many, but we still have some that we have to be prepared for. So don't have to overhaul your life, but just you know minimize the risk because you want to be able to uh, enjoy these things without having to put too much of a damper on it.
Yeah, we like to get outside in Wisconsin, and there's a lot of great things to do, but that comes with being prepared, and that's kind of what we're going to focus in on now, is being prepared. The first and the biggest one I think that I hear and see from you guys on any warning, being prepared, hazardous weather outlooks, it's just having the weather source and being weather aware. Those things combined together are great, but important to have multiple ways of getting warnings because.
Well, sometimes some of the different things can fail. So if you're in the main thing that I've always heard from people, especially the Evansville tornado, everybody I talked to, they got the warning from their cell phones. So the wireless emergency alert is typically the first way people find out about something. So a lot of people they're busy. A lot of us are busy and doing things that you're not sitting there actively watching the weather like Jeremy is. But once you find out about something, like you get alerted that that warning is out there, a lot of people seek confirmation that that risk is for them. So that's why we say, turn on the television, watch what the local TV meteorologists are saying about the situation. So if there's a tornado warning, they're going to be cutting in live, talking about the weather. That's a good source to have. If you have a weather radio, that's a great follow up to be able to find out whether or not there's actually a warning. If your power goes out, you can't watch TV, things like that, you can put a battery in those weather radios and still be able to listen in on what's happening. Sirens, those are meant more so for people that are outside as kind of a first alert, again, to say, like, hey, get inside, find out what's happening with the storm and be safe from that. So there's a number of different ways you can get information. There's apps you can download. The Weather Service, unfortunately, doesn't have one. FEMA does have an app for the phone that if you want to get things like severe thunderstorm warnings, the things that don't trigger WIA, you can download that app and get it as well. A lot of the TV stations also have their own apps that you could get as well. So just having multiple ways in case one thing goes down, like a cell phone tower, or if the weather radio transmitter goes down, things like that.
All right, turning our attention to being prepared as stuff is coming in. So we're ready to be ready to listen to those warning and stuff. But as the situation or as a storm is coming in, we get outlooks. We get all these terminology out there of risk, so to speak, of what's coming. What do you want people to know to be prepared as these storms are moving in, even a couple of days out?
Yeah. So one thing to know, a lot of times the severe weather part of the forecast doesn't show up in the cell phone apps or even our point click when you go to weather.gov and you click on the forecast. a lot of times it won't say severe weather is possible on top of the thunderstorm activity. So we a lot of times we'll post to like our own weather story on our website, which will highlight what we think is going to happen or what the scenario is. Is it going to be a night where we have large hail as possible, or is it damaging winds? We try to tell the story of the scenario more so through that weather story, which a lot of times also gets posted to our Facebook or our Twitter/X page as well. So that's a great way to stay up on what's happening locally. If you want, the Storm Prediction Center, they're the national experts in severe weather forecasting. They have their own website, spc.noaa.gov. They will put out their outlooks for where they think severe weather is going to occur, so you can follow along there. A lot of times we'll grab those and use those as kind of a baseline for talking about the severe weather risk here as well. So when it comes to like a few days out, that's when you can kind of at least get an awareness that something could occur. As you get closer and closer to the event, the details come together for, are all these ingredients going to come together to where we're going to have severe thunderstorms, or is something going to be out of sync that we're not going to get them? So we can just hone in on the details, like 5 to 9 tonight. That's the time frame to really be paying attention to the storms. Sometimes it might be overnight. We had it in a situation a few years ago where we had a squall line coming through in the middle of the night. That's a vulnerable situation for a lot of people because they're not paying as close of attention to what's going on. So just paying attention as that forecast gets closer and closer to when that severe weather event could occur.
And then transitioning into the severe weather event, as we're getting into it, we're using you are using what is called impact-based warnings, which to me means a couple of different things. But we'll go in the perspective of a storm. You guys issue some type of a warning, and you're gonna say the impacts on there. I think it's cool that you're sharing out kind of this and kind of getting a better understanding of why the criteria of why these things are severe. Beyond just the X, Y, and Z of a severe storm. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so every warning that we put out has 3 levels to it. There's a base, there's a second level, which is typically considerable damage, and then a third level, which is the highest end destructive emergency type situation. So the best way to kind of think about this is we want to talk about a tornado. Compare like an EF0 tornado, which might just maybe disturb the trees a little bit, maybe some shingles get lofted off a roof, compared to an EF5 type Barneveld type tornado. We want to talk about those two situations differently. Those EF5 type days are the ones where we get very concerned about, if people are not in their shelter, if they're out in a vulnerable situation, like in their cars, out and about, they're not going to be safe from that tornado. That's going to be the one day where we could have our highest amount of injuries, loss of life. So we really want to avoid people being in bad situations. So that's why we talk about these at these 3 levels. It's a little hard if you're not looking at the text, or if you're not listening in on what comes out to know what level you're at. A lot of times the TV meteorologist will be talking about it. Most of the warnings we've ever done are typically the base level type warnings, particularly with tornado warnings. We had with the Evansville tornado, that's the first time we've gone to our second level of warnings. That was based mainly upon some of the signals we were seeing from radar with how far up the debris was getting wafted into the sky. So we can use that as a gauge for how bad the situation is. So a lot of it is just, to give people an idea of how bad the situation is. If it's like going to be like 1-inch hail or a 90-mile-per-hour type wind coming in, those are 2 big different scenarios. And based on those levels that we're at, that will trigger the wireless emergency alerts on your phone. So all tornado warnings will trigger the alerts on your phone. Flash flooding, it's the second level, so the considerable, and that's what will trigger the WIA. And then for severe thunderstorm warnings, it's that third level, so 80-mile-per-hour winds or baseball-sized hail before your phones will go off. So it's just to get you extra aware of how dire or bad the situation might be.
Yeah, no, I think it's great to know and have a better understanding, because we get, I know this is a fear of every weather service is there's just so many warnings to be put out, and you ignore one of those, and that could equal some bad time for you. So I think it's important to understand a little bit better on the levels, but just not letting your guard down, so to speak, no matter what level it is. I mean, you still should practice the best practice that you can of putting your plan together. Turning attention quickly to flooding. I always don't leave too much time at the end, but I think it's certainly important to talk about. And it's been, I mean, I don't know if we've caught up from our drought. Maybe this is a good meteorologist question to ask. We've had a lot of precipitation in the last couple of weeks, this time or at this moment, but flooding, certainly got to keep an eye on that.
Yeah, so the amount of rainfall we've had recently has wiped out a lot of the drought in far southern Wisconsin. We've had a lot of our rivers go up to flood stage. Some of the bigger ones are still kind of working their way, the water's working their way down the system. But that does prep things for if we do get a scenario where we have thunderstorms that go over the same areas time and time again, we get more of a flash flooding type scenario. So some of the big things with the flooding is just not driving through flooded roadways. A lot of times people will see a road that looks like the water's not too far above the road, but with moving water, a lot of times what will happen is it'll wash out the culvert and a lot of the dirt and rocks and things that are underneath the road, so that when that car goes over it the first time, all that concrete then buckles and you fall down, the car goes into the moving water where the flooding is occurring. And that's where most of our drownings occur from flash flooding, is from people trying to drive through those roadways. So particularly if you see barriers or barricades up that are saying roads closed due to flash flooding, don't drive through it. Just in terms of like flooding in the city, people are walking around. While you might not drown, a lot of times there's a lot of disgusting things going through the water. So
Yeah.
you don't want to let your kids play around in floodwaters. Sometimes sewer manhole covers can come up if there's too much pressure. So some things to avoid when it comes to that. Our slogan is turn around, don't drown, because
Yeah.
of the driving thing.
We're right. We hear a lot here, and I'm sure a lot of municipalities across the state hear this all the time, that somebody moved a barrier to get around it, and you're like, we
That's a
put them
sign.
up for a reason, right? It's a sign to stop and turn around and
Yeah.
yeah, do something else. So, well, as much as I would love to continue this conversation, I know that your time is very valuable. So to wrap it up here, ultimately, to stay connected with you guys, no matter what time of the season, and just best practice to review those safety plans, build that emergency kit, whatever the case may be. You guys have a great website and great social media campaign. How can people stay in touch with what's going on?
So most of our stuff is online at our website, weather.gov. That's .gov/Milwaukee or Madison. We'll get you there as well. On there, we have a lot of this information saved. We also are on Facebook and Twitter/X, and we'll be making a lot of posts this week with some of the main things that we want to get across to people and just get them to start thinking about as we get more and more active with severe weather this year.
All right, Tim. Thank you so much for jumping on and doing this. I really appreciate it. Good luck for the rest of the season, and let's just hope that things just kind of even out, and we'll just go with that. We don't want to say anything high or low or anything else in between.
Yeah, we're good if we're done from here.
All right, you said it, not me. All right,
Yep.
thanks, Tim.
Yeah, thanks.